On the 9th of June 2026, Microsoft pushed an update to Windows computers around the world. For most people, it downloaded automatically overnight, just like any other Patch Tuesday. Nothing unusual. Nothing to worry about. By morning, IT administrators were watching their phones light up. Users who had installed the update found their computers refusing to boot. Others were locked out of their systems by BitLocker recovery prompts they had never seen before and did not expect. Dental software stopped working. Accounting software broke. Applications that had communicated seamlessly with Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint for years suddenly could not open a document. And in some cases, particularly on HP machines, computers went into full blue screen death loops, and the only path back was to manually uninstall the update. One IT administrator wrote in the feedback hub that the update broke their machine entirely and that removing the patch allowed the computer to boot correctly. But here is what the coverage of these problems is not explaining. The chaos on June 9 was not a random bad month. It was the collision of three separate things happening at exactly the same moment, the largest batch of security vulnerabilities ever disclosed in Microsoft's history, a mandatory deadline that Microsoft had been quietly building toward for months, and the final expiration window for hundreds of millions of Windows 10 machines that were already unsupported. The update was not a trap in the sense of deliberate sabotage. It was a trap in the sense that Microsoft created conditions where you had no good options, and they did not tell you clearly what those conditions were. I am going to walk you through all three layers, because what happened on June 9 is not the whole story. It is the visible part of a much larger pressure system that has been building for years. Here is the number that changes how you read everything that follows. Microsoft's June 2026 Patch Tuesday addressed a record 208 vulnerabilities in Windows and Windows components, the largest single Patch Tuesday release since the program was founded in 2003. Including Chromium and third-party components bundled in Microsoft products, the total vulnerability count for the month reached 571. 571 security vulnerabilities in 1 month's update. Among them was CVE 2026455657, a Windows kernel remote code execution vulnerability with a CVSS score of 9.8. A remote, unauthenticated attacker can run code at system level on any affected Windows machine with no user interaction required. That is the definition of wormable, software that can spread itself from machine to machine without anyone clicking anything. Security researchers at the Zero Day Initiative confirmed that threat actors and exploit developers around the world began reverse engineering the patch within hours of its release, attempting to build working exploits before organizations could deploy it. There was also a second CVSS 9.8 vulnerability in the same release, this one in HTTP, SYS, the core Windows networking component that powers IIS web servers and dozens of Windows services. And a third critical flaw in the Windows DHCP client, which means effectively every networked Windows machine on the planet. Now, here is where the trap closes. 17 days after June 9, on the 26th of June, 2026, Microsoft's mandatory Secure Boot Certificate rotation deadline arrives. This is the last regular Patch Tuesday before that deadline. Organizations that have not completed the Windows UEFI CA 2023 certificate rotation on all devices face a hard cutoff that could result in boot-level security failures. So the message from Microsoft was, install this update now because there are wormable vulnerabilities in the wild, but also, this same update is what rotates your secure boot certificates before the deadline. But also, this update may brick your computer, break your Office integration, and lock you out with BitLocker. Install it or face the consequences. Install it and face different consequences. That is the trap. To understand why this month in particular became so chaotic, you need to understand what Secure Boot is and why Microsoft decided to rotate it on a mandatory deadline in June 2026. Secure Boot is a security feature built into the firmware of modern computers. It verifies, before the operating system even loads, that the software starting your machine has been signed by a trusted authority. It is designed to block a category of attack called a bootkit, malicious software that installs itself below the operating system, invisible to antivirus tools, invisible to Windows itself, because it loads before Windows does. The certificates that Windows uses to validate secure boot are not permanent, they expire, and the certificates that most Windows devices have been using were approaching that expiration. Microsoft has been updating these certificates on consumer and non-managed business devices over the past several months, with the 26th of June 2026 as the hard deadline. Starting with the April 2026 Windows update, the Windows Security app included updated secure boot status information showing whether the new certificates had been applied. This is a genuine security improvement. The threaded addresses, firmware-level malware, like Black Lotus, which was documented attacking unpatched systems, is real and documented. Microsoft is not wrong to rotate the certificates. The question is how they did it. There are documented trouble spots in the June 2026 transition. Older PCs with outdated firmware may not properly support the new certificates and require a BIOS update from the manufacturer before the transition can complete. PCs that bypassed Windows 11's hardware requirements, the exact technique millions of people have been using to keep older machines running, cannot receive the new certificates correctly if secure boot was disabled during that process, and devices running legacy BIOS are outside the scope of the update entirely. So the machines that are most likely to have problems with the June update are precisely the machines owned by people who were already frustrated with Microsoft's hardware requirements, older computers, machines that don't officially qualify for Windows 11, and systems where users made workarounds to keep their equipment running. The people least served by Microsoft's recent decisions are, once again, the ones hit hardest by this one. And underneath all of this, there is a second time bomb that has been ticking since October 2025. The 14th of October, 2025, was the day Microsoft ended free security updates for Windows 10. That is now 8 months in the past. But its consequences are arriving right now, in June 2026, in ways that most mainstream coverage is not connecting. Microsoft ended free support for Windows 10 on the 14th of October 2025, forcing hundreds of millions of users to choose between upgrading to Windows 11, purchasing extended security updates, bypassing hardware requirements, or switching to an alternative operating system. The move capped a decade-long shift that transformed Windows from a standalone product into a cloud-connected portal for Microsoft's subscription services. Consumer group which, in the UK, estimated roughly 21 million people were still using Windows 10 at the end of support deadline, with roughly 1/4 of those users intending to keep using Windows 10 despite the end of support. That is millions of machines in a single country running software that no longer receives security patches, exposed to every vulnerability that Microsoft is now disclosing in record-setting monthly releases. Microsoft offered a 1-year bridge, paid extended security updates, available to consumers for $30, which extends security-only patches through October 2026. ESU enrollment changes in 2025 require account linkage or specific enrollment methods, creating friction for users who prefer local accounts or who do not want their telemetry tied to a Microsoft account. In other words, to buy the security updates you need to protect your own machine, you may be required to hand Microsoft the account data you have been trying to avoid. The turning point is this. The June 9 update is the one that landed the secure boot certificate rotation and patched the wormable kernel vulnerability. Windows 10 machines on the paid Extended Security Update program received a version of this update too, KB 5094127. That version carries the same confirmed bug that breaks Office document automation in third-party applications, affecting software that uses OLE automation to communicate with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access. So Windows 10 users who paid $30 for continued security, who are already operating on borrowed time, found that the update they paid for also broke their business software. And Windows 10 users who did not enroll in the paid program are sitting on machines that did not receive the critical wormable kernel patch at all. There is no good position here. That is what makes it a trap. The specific failures from the June update are worth understanding in detail because they reveal something important about the way Microsoft manages its update process and the real cost of that approach on ordinary users. The most severe reported problems were boot failures and BitLocker lockouts. Users reported that the update corrupted the boot chain through changes to the Secure Boot DBX and Boot Manager, leaving systems locked out. Recovery required manual intervention, and organizations paused deployment while awaiting a corrected patch. The pattern of affected machines points disproportionately toward HP hardware. Multiple IT administrators noted they had not seen a single report of this boot loop issue that was not on an HP machine. Beyond the boot failures, a separate confirmed bug broke a fundamental piece of Windows infrastructure that most users have never heard of, but that many businesses depend on daily. Microsoft received reports that certain third-party applications could no longer launch Microsoft Office applications or open documents after installing the June 9 update. This issue affects software that uses OLE automation, a long-standing technology that allows applications to communicate with Office programs. Confirmed affected applications included CCH Engagement, Workpaper Manager, dental software including Dentrix and SoftDent, and Zotero. OLE automation is not obscure. It is how accounting software opens spreadsheets, how dental practice management systems open patient records in Word, how research tools export citations to formatted documents. The important point is not that Word forgot how to open files. The important point is that Windows disturbed one of the oldest and most business-critical integration layers between Office and the software that surrounds it. Microsoft's published workaround for the OLE automation failure is to open the affected application or document directly instead of launching it from the third-party application. For organizations, a workaround requires contacting Microsoft Support for Business. That is the official guidance, change how your staff works, or call us. A permanent fix is coming in a future update with no specific date given. Meanwhile, the Secure Boot certificate deadline is June 26. The wormable kernel vulnerability is unpatched on every machine that deferred the update. And the people who installed the update on time are dealing with broken software and in some cases unbootable computers. Consider what June 9 looked like for a small accounting firm. 4 staff members, a Windows-based practice management system that has been running for 12 years, QuickBooks, Microsoft Office. A document workflow where client files move seamlessly between their practice software and Word, formatted, saved, sent. The update installed automatically on Monday night, June 9. Tuesday morning, staff came in to find that clicking any document link in their practice management system opened nothing. No error message. Nothing. Word simply did not launch. They spent the first hour of their workday troubleshooting, assuming they had done something wrong. By midday, they found the community forum posts. By afternoon, they understood the problem was Microsoft's. The workaround, open Word first, then navigate to the file, works. But it breaks the workflow they have used for over a decade. Files that were supposed to take 30 seconds now take several minutes. Multiply that by every client interaction, every document, every day, until Microsoft ships a fix with no announced date. This firm is not exceptional. The community reports flooding in after the June update affected everyday users and enterprise IT administrators alike. From blue screens of death to BitLocker recovery loops and frozen OneDrive integrations, the disruption was widespread and immediate. And for the Windows 10 users sitting outside this story, the ones who chose not to pay $30 for extended security updates, or who are running machines that cannot meet Windows 11's hardware requirements, the human cost is different but arguably larger. They did not receive the patch for the wormable kernel vulnerability. Their machines are exposed to a class of attack that security researchers are already working to weaponize. Every day that passes without that patch is a day of increased risk. The forced move to Windows 11 and away from Windows 10's comparatively transparent telemetry settings raises compliance questions. Even the security features that justify the hardware cutoff often coexist with data collection mechanisms that users cannot fully disable without breaking functionality. The people most exposed to the June 2026 update's damage, whether through broken software, boot failures, or unpatched security, are disproportionately the same people Microsoft has been squeezing for the past 3 years. Users on older hardware, users who prefer local accounts, users who have been resisting the push toward continuous cloud integration and mandatory account linkage. The honest read on all of this requires separating what is a genuine security emergency from what is a recurring institutional failure. The genuine security emergency is real. A wormable CVSS 9.8 vulnerability in the Windows kernel, exploitable remotely with no user interaction required, is the kind of threat that organizations need to patch immediately. Every hour of delay is a window of exposure, while threat actors reverse engineer the patch. Microsoft is correct that this update needed to be deployed. The secure boot certificate rotation addresses a documented class of attack that has caused real damage to real organizations. These are not manufactured crises. The institutional failure is also real. A patch that ships with known boot failures on a major hardware vendor's machines, that breaks a decades-old integration layer relied on by dental offices and accounting firms, and that offers open the file directly as its official mitigation, that is a quality control problem. Microsoft's own support documentation acknowledged the third-party application failure and confirmed a workaround exists, but Microsoft has provided no timeline for a permanent fix. The pattern, deploy first, fix later, offer workarounds, is not new. It has characterized Patch Tuesday releases for years. But the scale of this month, with over 200 vulnerabilities and a hard secure boot deadline, made the consequences more visible than usual. The broader structural problem is the one this channel has been tracking for months. Windows 10's end of support created a population of users in an impossible position, too old to upgrade without new hardware, too exposed to stay unpatched, and now facing a record-setting disclosure month where the stakes of deferring updates have never been higher. ESU enrollment friction, the account linkage requirements, the telemetry concerns, means that even the paid bridge option is not available to everyone on the terms they would accept. For the audience of this channel, the practical question is straightforward. What do you actually do? If you are on Windows 11 and the June update broke something, uninstalling KB5094126 via Update History is the immediate fix, and you should watch for Microsoft's remediation update. If you are on Windows 10 without ESU, the wormable kernel vulnerability is a real risk, and enrolling in the paid program before October 2026 is the most defensible position. If you are evaluating your alternatives more broadly, this month is useful evidence for that conversation. Return to the morning of the 10th of June, 2026. The accounting firm, the dental office, the IT administrator watching their phone light up, the HP machines in boot loops, the Word documents that would not open. None of these people did anything wrong. They kept Windows Update enabled, the way Microsoft recommends. They trusted the system. And the system, on this particular Tuesday, handed them a choice between a wormable kernel vulnerability that security researchers were already weaponizing and an update that might lock them out of their computers. That is the environment that Microsoft has created, not through malice, through a combination of genuine security complexity, aggressive platform transition pressure, and a quality assurance process that consistently treats the installed base of ordinary users as collateral in the race to patch threats before they can be exploited. The next video in this series asks the question that follows directly from this one: what does a realistic exit look like? Not for a programmer, not for a system administrator. For the person watching this on a television, who has used Windows for 30 years, and who is now asking, genuinely, for the first time, whether there is another option. Because the answer has changed in the last 2 years, and this month, for a lot of people, is the month the question got serious. If that is where you are, subscribing is how you see that conversation happen in real time, not as a sales pitch for Linux. As an honest account of what the options actually are, who they work for, and who they don't.